Today I'm going to be showing you an install of the Z-TRAK on a 2019 F-150 or Raptor, and instead of using the self-tappers, we're going to be using these plus nuts that Z-TRAK is now offering. This is going to be great for my overland setup, so I'm not going to be doing every single hole on the rail, just a few for right now. But yeah, let's get to the install. So these are the tools we're going to end up using. We're going to be using some drill bits, an 11 and 15. These are going to be for the plus nut install tool. A 3/8 drill bit is what's going to be needed to install the plus nuts. And then the bolts are a 10 mil, so I'm just using a 1/4-inch ratchet to install the bolts. A center punch paint marker. These are going to be for marking and drilling out the holes. And then anti-seize for all the bolts, a drill, and then I ended up opting to a step bit to drill out the holes. So one thing to note when you're going to start the install, on most of the Z-Traks, there's going to be this little notch here. This is going to be at the top. This is going to be your dead center point, so you can measure and get the rail squared away in the bed. All right, for the first step, I'm going to be measuring the center point. So I'm going to need a measuring tape and a paint marker. I'm going to measure from one side to the other side to get the total width of the bed. Mark my center so I can match it up with the notch on the Z-TRAK rail. So I'm going to take this from one end to the other and measure it. We're seeing 62 and a half. Half of that would be 31 1/4. So I will take 31 1/4 and mark it right here. So now with my marks made, I'm going to hold the Z-TRAK rail up and make sure everything's fitting properly. Kind of position it where I'm going to want it to be at. The shape of this Z right here, this longer part goes towards the bottom for the offset of the bed back here. So make sure everything looks like it's going to fit good, all centered up. And then I'll get the height set to where the rail looks the most level. And then hold up and make some paint marks. All right, so what I've done is I took the Z-TRAK rail and I held it up and made sure it was on my center mark. I marked 2 holes, but before I marked those, I made sure the Z-TRAK was set where I wanted it to be. So I marked 2 holes, center punched them. I just got them drilled out, so I can now put my nut zerts in and then set the rail up, make sure everything looks good before marking all of my other holes. So now I've got the Z-TRAK rail all set up in place. I marked my holes and then I used a center punch, which is still back up in the truck bed, to punch out my holes. I then drilled them out with a pretty small drill bit to give me a pilot hole. And then I used a 3/8 drill bit to drill them out all the way to insert the plus nuts. So now your kit's including this tool here. This is gonna be the plus nut tool. The way this works is this ridge side is going to be against the surface of the plus nut. This is going to keep the plus nut from spinning in place. You'll use a wrench on the nut here in the middle to hold this in place, and then you'll tighten this. And what that will do is open up these surfaces that are cut out and clamp this in there. So it's essentially a nut zert, but we call it's a plus nut because of the shape of how it opens up. So now the 2 wrenches you're going to need are going to be a 15 and an 11. The 15 is for that nut in the center, and the 11 is going to be for the bolt. So let's get those installed. With the placement of the holes in the Z-TRAK rail for this specific bed, it kind of hits right on the edge of where this ridge starts. So what I'm going to do is make sure I try to keep this as level as possible with the surface, the plus nut that is, to make sure it's getting installed as good as possible. So let's get that going. This is how that plus nut sits in the bed. You can see I made sure the hole was like right there on the edge of the ridge. That's how it lined up perfect on my F-150. You can kind of see how that plus nut works as long as it'll focus in good. As you suck down those threads, it pulls that insert in, which pinches it on the front and back. So these are going to be a lot more secure than that self-tapper. All right, so now I got those plus nuts in place. What I ended up doing is I put the rail up on the truck. The bolts aren't all the way tight. One thing to keep in mind, if those plus nuts aren't super tight, if you didn't get them tight enough, if you're going in with those bolts, you can get those to spin. That can make them a pain to get them out. So when you're starting those, make sure you're able to start them by hand, or if you have to use a wrench, go super easy on them and make sure it's not trying to spin that plus nut, because you might need to tighten it up a little bit more if you didn't before. Something I didn't have an issue with, but something to definitely keep in mind with these plus nuts. So I've got it all in place. So now what I'm going to do is mark the other holes I want to do. My plan was not to go crazy with drilling holes in the bed of my truck just because that's not something I was wanting to do. So I'm going to do just the 2 on the outsides and then these 4 center ones. I think that'll be plenty strong for my use case being inside the camper since I won't be putting bikes on it. This is where I'm at here. Got the one I installed marked below it. These 2 are drilled out, those 2 are marked. So that's kind of my setup as far as what I'm doing for the Z-TRAK system. Alright, so now with all of the plus nuts installed, I'm going to get the Z-TRAK rail up in and mounted using all the screws. Pro trick, as you're putting in all the screws, leave them all loose, and once every single one is in, you'll tighten them up. This will make it go a lot easier. One thing a lot of people have mistakes with is they'll put the first screw in or second screw in, then they'll get them tight and they'll try to put them all in. That rail has a little bit of tolerance in the holes for the screws, so everything, or the bolts I mean, so everything can get set properly. Also, one thing I'd recommend doing is getting some anti-seize and putting it on every single bolt that goes in your rail. Whether you do 2, 8, all of them, always put anti-seize on the bolts. This will make sure that if you ever have to take it off, it's easy to get in and out. It also helps lubricate the threads as you're going in, and make sure they all go in by hand. That's the big key. And just like that, the Z-TRAK rail is now installed, and that's going to be perfect for securing this propane tank, a spare tire, anything. I'm going to be using a lot of these. These are the O-rings. They clip in just like any E-TRAK system. Any E-TRAK accessory will work as well. Did find that the Z-TRAKs do have a little bit tighter of a tolerance, so they're not really slopping around as much, but these work perfect.